You do this better than anybody that I've ever seen. People want to buy goods from airmail because they're curated by an organization that's run by Graydon Carter. People want to go to your after parties. If they didn't get into the Oscar party and they thought they were somebody, they were crushed by that. So what is it? What is the sauce that you are serving?
I think any outshoot of your life should be organic to you and your worldview and your sense of design and your taste. We built up a reputation for doing things in a first-rate manner and of treating people really well. There's no trickery, and so I think that if we say this is worthwhile to read or to buy, we back it up with a history and with our guarantee that we approve of this.
There's one other thing, if I can be brutally honest with you, there's one other thing. Your aperture focuses in, and it's one of veracity, it's one of truth. There's no mendacity in it. So if you think somebody screwed up, you write about it. I can't remember exactly what you wrote about Trump, but it was like some short-fingered, I don't know what the hell it was.
Short-fingered Bulgarian.
Bulgarian's fucking perfect.
Yeah.
I mean, you can't come up with, you like invented Sudoku before there was Sudoku. I mean, it's like perfect. But my point is, you see it for what it is. And this is why people have anxiety around you, because they want you to see them as good. Well, welcome to Open Book. I am your host, Anthony Scaramucci. I am delighted today to have with me Graydon Carter. Graydon Carter is the founder of Airmail, but before that, he was the co-creator of Spy magazine. He edited the New York Observer, and for 25 years, he was the award-winning editor of Vanity Fair. He's also the Emmy and Peabody Award-winning producer of more than a dozen documentaries and one hit Broadway show. And Graydon, I have been following your career since I was 22 years old. I bought my first Spy magazine on the train from Long Island as I was heading into the city, trying to get myself a job. And you were probably beating up on Donald Trump at the time, which was actually quite funny. But the book that we're going to talk about today is When the Going Was Good, an editor's adventure during the last golden age of magazines. But how did it all start? You're a Brit, right?
But no, first of all, Anthony, I'm so honored to be here with you. And I love your other podcast as well, as you know. No, I'm Canadian.
Canadian. Okay.
Yeah.
So where did you grow up? In Toronto? Where?
I grew up in Ottawa, which is the capital city. It was considered one of the snowiest, coldest capital cities in the world back when I was growing up. And strange enough, half our culture came from the United States and half came from Britain, with a lot of Canadian hockey thrown in between.
And how'd you find your way down to New York?
Well, I was in college, and I happened upon this office where a number of young people were with typewriters, and they were setting up a literary and political magazine. And the university, that was the University of Ottawa, they'd given them office space and a grant. And they asked if I would like to join them. And I said, sure. And they said, well, we're looking for an art director. And I said, well, I can draw. And they said, great, you're the art director. And so I don't know if you've ever been involved with a small magazine, but they're bitter little circles of concentric hell. And everything's fighting over everything because the stakes are just unbelievably low.
Yeah, well, that's Washington, Graydon.
That's Washington, exactly.
That's why they pick each other's eyeballs out, because they're tiny stakes.
Well, the stakes are higher in Washington than they were at this little magazine.
Not for some of these aides. It's not. Trump did have a good line. He said to me once, and by the way, he said this to me on a Wednesday, Graydon, and I know because I was only there for one Wednesday. He said to me, they'll pick your eyeball out with an ice pick. They'll drop it in a martini glass and still talk to you like nothing happened.
Well, he's doing that now. So
yeah, well, no, he's a machete. He's got a machete.
Yeah. So
all right. So
anyway,
why magazines? Because you're a Renaissance man. You've built businesses. Why magazines?
Because if you grew up in Ottawa in the 1950s and 60s, magazines told you about the world outside your cold windows. More so, like magazines tell you about the way we live now. Newspapers tell you about the news of the way we live now. And magazines back then, like the New Yorker and Esquire and Life and Look, were my sort of passports to an outside world. So I'd never worked in a magazine before I became the art director of this one. And then gradually I became the editor. And it did nothing but lose money. It wasn't particularly good. Nobody had worked at a magazine before, which was painfully evident to the readers, certainly. But it did get me a job at Time magazine in New York in 1978 as a writer. And that was the beginning. That was the beginning of my life in a way. But Time in those days was it was such a dominant magazine. I think there were something like 800 people on the masthead. It had a weekly circulation of 4 million. When I got there was people like Walter Isaacson, 𝗕ciecie𝗸𝗵 became the chief book critic of the New York Times. Frank Rich, who became the New York Times chief theater critic and later a successful producer at HBO of Succession and other shows. Evan Thomas, who became a famous historian. My partner at Spy, Kurt Anderson. My partner at Airmail, Alexander Stanley. Maureen Dowd. I mean, you could go on and on.
Do you remember 𝗕cie?
𝗕cie was the White House correspondent.
Yeah, you used to write that column in Time about leadership. Yeah. Remember presidential leadership?
Yes. So I've never met him because he was down in D.C. all the time. But anyway, that was my first introduction to New York, and I dreamt of moving here, and I was very excited to be at Time among people who were so incredibly smart and talented.
Well, I grew up out on Long Island. I don't know if you'd recognize the name Publishers Clearinghouse.
Of course.
Okay, so I grew up about 2 miles from Publishers Clearinghouse, and my best friend from home, his mom was like a clerical assistant there. And so when I went to college, she gave me a gift. She said, here are 60 magazines. I get the magazines for free. I'm going to give you a yearly subscription to 60 magazines. Wow. Unfortunately, Playboy and Penthouse were not on the list, Graydon, because you remember that era as well. But anyway, that's how I got introduced to Time magazine and Newsweek, Forbes, and of course, Vanity Fair and others. And so I'm in your era. I'm a magazine lover to this day. I love holding it in my hands.
Me too.
But for people that didn't grow up like we did in the magazine era, give us a little bit of the romanticism of the magazine era in the world. The color, the placement, the pictures, the Demi Moores,
Well, first of all, they were owned by people who loved and operated by people who loved magazines. I worked for Henry Grunwald at Time magazine and for Cy Newhouse at Vanity Fair, and the magazines were hugely profitable. They were expensive to put out, but hugely profitable. And I had never had an expense account before I came to New York, and it was a life-changing experience. I went 5 years without ever turning on my oven. I mean, I can't cook anyway, so it was just as well. But and because magazines, they were very much a center of the culture, and they helped not only report on the culture, but drive the culture. And as a result, they attracted the best and the brightest. What later went to, .com startups and to Wall Street came to magazines in those days. And it was exciting to be around such, energetic, intelligent people, and to have the wherewithal to do any kind of journalism that you wanted. The luxuries at Condé Nast were exponentially greater than those at Time, and it made very competitive, difficult jobs a lot easier.
Fresh air, sunshine, and good food. That's what spring is all about. And with HelloFresh, you can bring the season right to your table. You can get high-quality ingredients and farm-fresh produce delivered straight to your door. No grocery lines, no wasted food. Just fresh, flavorful meals you actually want to cook. And if you're short on time like me, check out the new ready-made meals. Chef-crafted and ready in just 3 minutes. I love my Italian food, so the pasta primavera is a big favorite of mine. Whether you're a home cook or just hungry after a long day, HelloFresh makes dinner effortless and delicious. Feel great with meals that fit your spring schedule and make the season even more delicious. Go to HelloFresh.com/openbookfm now to get 10 free meals with a free item for life. 1 per box with active subscription. Free meals applied as discount on first box. New subscribers only. Varies by plan. Well, one of the things about your book for me, as I was going down memory lane. Fran Lebowitz,
right?
Madonna's in the book. Christopher Hitchens, I mean, he was the man,
He
20
was.
years ago. And unfortunately, we lost him, a very gifted writer, on a very provocative one. But I guess I see you as a sort of an interior designer and an exterior designer of thought. So just give me a moment, okay?
Yeah.
I've been to your restaurants, Waverly Inn. I've been to the Monkey Bar. There's a majesty to those places, but there's also a simplicity. I'm a subscriber to Airmail. I love the way, I look. One of the reasons why I love magazines, I want to see what the editor's doing in terms of the format. Where are the pictures going? Where are the stories going? What's important? The reason I do open book, Graydon, is I'm in love with authors. I figure if you put countless hours into writing that book, I can spend a few hours reading and learning something from you. But this is a gift that you have. Where did you get this gift? And how do you think about applying it?
Well, I'm not sure it's a gift. It's a loose skill that's built up over years. I mean, my job now at Airmail is not appreciably different than my first edit when I was the first editor, which was 52 years ago. It's the same job essentially. It's just I do it a lot better now, and I have skill sets that I didn't have then at all. And then there's sort of like a choir master. You're trying to bring all these disparate voices together to in a single issue of something to sort of be in rough harmony with each other. They could be, altos and sopranos and everything. But the fact is you try to work it all out in harmony. And an editor's chief job when he's talking to a writer is to say, Anthony, this is the single most important story you've ever done. And then you go out and you work on that story for 2 or 3 months, and you come back and we line up the photographs and the research and the legal review and the fact checking, and then we publish it. And then for me to come back to you 4 months later and say, no, Anthony, this is the single most important story you've ever done. And that's basically, an editor's job is a lot easier than a writer's job. And it's a very gratifying career especially during this incredible period.
Yeah, we're going to get to the period in a second, but I want to have a little bit of build up for our audience. Tell us what the Carter pick is. I found that so fascinating.
I don't know what that means.
Well, in your book, you write about iconic writers, and somebody said to you that if you're picked by Graydon Carter, it's a sign of grace. It's almost like an award, if you will.
Well, it's fine. We nurtured sort of unknown writers and helped make them stars. At Vanity Fair, most of the writers, because they had to be able to write, long stories between sometimes 10 to 15 to 20,000 words, and that takes great skill and experience. Most of the writers were at the very top of their games. We had so many Pulitzer Prize winners. I had people like David Halberstam and Michael Hare and Sebastian Junger and Maureen Orth and Marie Brenner and Michael Lewis. I mean, it was incredible. And then I had incredible essayists like Christopher Hitchens and 𝗕𝗁𝗏𝗺 and James Walcott. So, and then I had a stable of photographers that was probably unmatched since the glory days of Life magazine. I had, Annie Leibovitz and Helmut Newton and Bruce Weber. And so, as I got comfortable in the job, I learned what I could do with all this talent.
Well, I mean, I guess for me, the frustrating thing for me today is that the gas is down in the tank for magazines. We see them in the newsstands. Very few people are reading them as much. I have to confess to you that if I'm reading a magazine, it's likely on my Kindle or it's on my iPad. It's no longer there for me. And what did we lose, Graydon, by that? Because I'm sure somebody said, as the horseless carriage was coming into vogue, that we lost something, right? And I'm sure somebody said that we lost something in Fifth Avenue, New York, when the Gilded Age ended. What did we lose? Well,
it's funny because magazines they were very much not a reflection of the culture, but the big ones really drove the culture. I remember, in the mid 1970s, both Time and Newsweek put Bruce Springsteen on their covers the same week, which is a big faux pas in Newsweekly.
Right. It's like two women wearing the same dress
Only
to a Graydon Carter Vanity Fair Oscar party.
1,000 times worse. So, but it's so, and it, and I, the fact is, after the financial crash in New York, certainly we lost newsstands. There used to be major newsstands at every single intersection, sometimes two of them. They were often mom and pop operations run by veterans. And after 2008, it just became harder and harder for them. And now, and also every office building had a newsstand in it. Now they sell, lottos and gum. And when you see a proper news kiosk in New York City, it's like a movie set. It's like something out of a Nora Ephron film. And they're so rare now.
Well, I my old boss, when I worked at Goldman, this is 30 years ago, he had a picture in his office that he continually updated, and it was a newsstand. And so he had gotten to Goldman Sachs in the 1950s and took a picture of the newsstand. And there were
okay. Why did he do this?
Because he was in love with New York. He saw that as a zeitgeist, as a representation of the city and its culture.
Yep.
And so literally you would see the 1950s pictures, Graydon, were like clothespins hanging up the
photo play
and chewing gum and packs of cigarettes. And then as he got into the 80s, you could see the evolution. But you were in what you call the golden age. And I believe it was the golden age because it was a proliferation of talent, volume, and interest. And both of us are old enough to know when Life died. It was sort of like December of 1972, Life died. And I remember my parents being saddened by that, but little did they know that they were coming into a golden age. So describe the fever that you so eloquently do in the book.
Well, one of the things, what say streaming services and podcasts are now, magazines were then. They attracted a lot of the dominant literary and journalistic talent. They were evident everywhere because of newsstands, even in cities that were not as large as New York's, and they were they were available all across the country. Vanity Fair was available all around the world in the same form, and if you were living in Paris, Vanity Fair would give you the worldview of editors operating out of New York City, and because New York is New York in the center of everything, at least certainly to us, that it had exponential influence and weight, and they were thick. They were great value. You'd pay, I can't remember what you used to pay for a copy of Vanity Fair, like $5, $6, but some of our issues would be 450 pages thick with 150 pages of editorial and 300 pages of advertising, and the advertisers, they paid dearly to be on the magazine. They paid upwards of $100,000 a page. It was profitable, and we had outsized influence. I mean, there were major newspapers like the Times, the Washington Post, and the Wall Street Journal. But magazines had a special place, and they still do in a way. I think that the Atlantic and New York and the New Yorker are still very strong. Mm-hmm. And Economist you would never know there was a recession picking up a copy of The Economist.
Yeah.
So it's still there. You just need owners who care about what they make and who are willing to invest in the product they make.
Yeah, but it's different though. Honestly, it's different because I get The Economist on my tablet. I used to remember the smell of Vanity Fair, the ink, right. and I remember the freshness of it in my hands.
Well, and the perfume ads, because
the perfume ads, you'd open the perfume, exactly, all of that stuff, even the Armani masculine, cologne ads. But the thing you did, which I know you're aware of, but I'm just going to say it out loud to you. For a younger person, me in the 1980s, when I was in my mid-20s, I had no idea what the Allen and Company conference was. You taught me that. I had no idea what the establishment was and that there was a need for a new establishment. Remember,
Right.
like you, I'm an outsider. I grew up in a blue collar family out here on Long Island. And I sort of felt like when I picked up Vanity Fair, you were scaling me into a different, almost like at a different electron orbit than I was in. Were you aware that you were doing that for some of us, or
Um,
what was the genesis of the editorial
well,
ideas
it's
behind
funny
what you
because
were doing?
if I was in Canada at exactly the same day in the 1980s and the same age as you, I would have felt exactly the same way about Vanity Fair. And I think that I didn't have that most of the time. I'll be honest. It wasn't about crafting the great magazine or anything like that. It was just desperately trying to hold on to my job. I have 5 kids, and also a golden age is the golden age because there's a lot of competition. When the Hollywood had its golden age, Columbia, Paramount, Fox, MGM, they were all phenomenal in those days. So during the magazine golden age, which probably stretched from the 1970s through the end of the aughts, um, everything was good. Gardening magazines, good. Cooking magazines were good. Sports Illustrated was an incredible magazine. ESPN magazine was
Yeah.
an incredible magazine. So
Mhm.
you just had a lot of competition. So there was never a moment where you could sit back and say, "Oh God, we did it. It's all good."
Couple of real iconic pictures that I want to ask you about. So the one was the Demi Moore picture.
Before my
Um,
time, that was
okay,
just before my
but
time.
I thought when she was painted that was your time. No,
No, that wasn't my time. No,
still before your time. Okay,
yeah, before my
so
time.
yeah, that was 91. The Demi Moore naked picture, right?
Yes, and I came in '92, and I had a rough. I'll be honest, I had a rough first couple of years because um, we had at Spy Magazine we'd made a lot of fun of the writers at Vanity Fair, of the editor of Vanity Fair, and of
I know
its.
you wrote about it in the book that you had a rough start. The Tina Brown loyalists were sort of pissed at you, right?
Well, I didn't fire anybody at first. I wanted to see if I could bring them around to my way of working and thinking. And I like a drama-free office. I like people to work together and to respect each other's talents and to say please and thank you. And so for the first 2 years, it was pretty grim. I wouldn't even bring my children into the office. But I finally zeroed it, and most of the leftover staff was basically there just to report my inadequacies to the outside world at dinner parties around New York, and they did. And 1 week after being there for 2 years, and I'd only fired I think one person before in my life. I fired 3 troublemakers in 1 week, and then things started changing. The office became more collegial and cordial, and we all worked together basically hand in hand for the next 23 years. We lost almost no major senior staff members during that period.
Well, I mean, I listen. I it's funny you say that because when you're merging or you're joining a new entity, you've got to get either the culture right or you've got to replace parts of the culture. I bought a company, it was sort of a division, I should say, from Citibank. And the good news is the senior guys are still with me 15 years later. There were a couple of
Yep,
people, unfortunately, we had to remove.
of course.
So I totally get it. Let's talk about Annie Leibovitz for a second. How would you describe Annie? And I got to tell you a funny story if you don't mind.
Go ahead.
I met Annie through Bill Maher. So I was on the Bill Maher show. Bill and I owned a piece of the Mets together after I was summarily fired from the Trump White House. Trump
Didn't know
won.
this. Okay.
Yeah. So Bill and I, he was calling me Tony Soprano on the Potomac. I think he called me a Jersey Shore cast member. But people, I didn't mind. I was getting lit up on Saturday Night Live. I took the opposite approach of everybody. I just went on all the shows. I leaned into it, and Bill and I developed a friendship. He invited Annie Leibovitz to the suite together. We were at Citi Field, and even though I had already rebuffed Trump at this point, the fact that I was once with Trump, I had a cancelization on my forehead. She really had nothing, no bid for me.
No, I think she's a
And
diehard Democrat.
yeah,
Yeah.
even though I was serving hot dogs and corned beef and
Yeah.
all kinds of, she had no bid for me. But I think she's one of, and I mean this sincerely, I think she's one of the most talented people out there. So tell us about your relationship with her and some of the art that she did. and
Well, she was one of the great.
photography art, I should say.
Oh my gosh, she's one of the great assets of the magazine, probably the greatest asset. And I'm each, when I did, we eventually invented two tentpole issues. One, the Hollywood issue, which was Cy Newhouse's idea, actually, not mine. In fact, I resisted it first. And the second, the New Establishment issue, which came out in the fall. And that was largely David Halberstam's idea. So, but I had this incredible asset in Annie Leibovitz to be able to photograph what we were trying to tell orally and on the page. A great magazine is a combination of words and images, and Annie was our principal photographer, and she can shoot sort of middle-aged white men and make them look much more epic than they really are, which was a great advantage. And eventually, having your portrait taken by Annie was a symbol of achievement in America, the way being painted by Van Dyck was in previous centuries. And I watched. It took a while for her to come around to shooting group shots. I love group shots. They sort of tell you the history of something at a time. And at first she resisted. She thought it was a sort of cheap trick, but then she got into it. And to watch her craft a Hollywood cover, because you'd have sort of 11 people, and she would have been preparing for 2 or 3 days beforehand. And she would have people roughly the same size as the cover subjects, wearing roughly the same coloring clothing. And she would light it and pose it and get it all constructed the way the old masters did, so that by the time the subjects came in for the photo shoot, she had it all figured out. It wasn't all of a sudden, putting the tall people in the back row and the short people in the front row. And it didn't always go smoothly. One point I wanted to shoot all the living Bond girls, and so this took about 3 months to pull together, and we managed to get them all. Except we were missing one, and it was this actress, French actress named Claudine Auger, and I don't know if you remember, but she shot her husband, a very famous American Olympic skier named Spider Savage, and she was a big thing at the time. But I thought, oh no, we have to have her. And so the woman who works with Jane at the magazine, Jane Sark, works with Annie at the magazine, Jane Sark, and she said, okay, I finally found her, but she wants to be flown over by the Concorde, and she wants to stay at the Carlisle. I thought, God, we've worked on this for 4 months. We've spent so much money on it. Anyway, I thought, okay, let's do that. So we fly her over in the Concorde. We put her up at the Carlisle. The day of the shoot, Jane comes into my office and said she won't leave her hotel room. I said, you've got to be kidding me. And she said, no. She said, no. She refuses to come out. I said, look, we need Claudine Auger for this shoot to make it complete. She goes, wait a minute, Claudine Auger? No. This woman's Claudine Lange. So this is a different actress. This is a woman with her. This is also a French actress, but it wasn't the one we were looking for. And so I said, we'd flown this woman across the Atlantic. I said, you've got to tell her she's going to have to check out at the end of the day, and we'll fly her back business class to Paris. So they don't always go smoothly, but we
story. I mean,
over the decades, we produced some amazing group shots.
Well, I mean, no, I want to talk about one if you don't mind, because based on my experience with Annie Leibovitz, the picture that she took of the Bush administration, which I think is probably one of their most famous pictures, okay? And this was, I think the title of the article was The Path to War.
Yes.
And it was a picture of Bush with Rumsfeld and Card and Cheney and Powell. I know you remember the picture. Yep. I mean, she had that picture helped Bush, by the way, my opinion.
I know.
So what tell us what went down there?
I think, it took a while to wrangle them, to get them all into one room. This was before the invasion of Iraq.
Yep.
And it was, probably a ham-fisted way of showing American resolve after 9/11. And people were scurrying around especially journalists, trying to figure out how to report on this and figure out the way forward on this. Anyway, the funny thing is the big difference between Republicans and Democrats is Republicans are really down They're sort of buttoned down operations. After that, I got one of the few thank you notes from a cover subject from Dick Cheney, and I thought, okay, that's the way they do things. I
no
don't
question.
think
No,
a Democrat.
to this day, he'll write me a note thanking me for supporting, his daughter Liz in the whole Trump debacle. So he's very.
I respect.
He's very formal like that. But I think I just want you to react to this. Okay, I read the book. I followed your career. I'm a huge fan. I remember before I got to know you, Graydon. I was wangling my way into the Waverly Inn. When I had to get a reservation there.
Not
and,
that
I remember taking my wife there and feeling so cool that I was in there. And then, of course,
you need your own restaurant.
And I had my own restaurant. I do. And finally, have my own restaurant. But I also, you probably don't even know this, but my 5th, 10th, 15th anniversary parties were at the Monkey Bar because I'm in 527 Madison. And I've been there for 20 years, which is right there. And I know all the doormen at the Monkey Bar, all the doormen at the hotel, and you did such a beautiful job there. And I have such good memories of your restaurants. But I want you to react to this. There's something that you did, and you probably are aware of it, but you may not be aware of it. And so I'm going to say what you did, and then I want you to react to it. You had Hollywood abuzz. What is Vanity Fair thinking? You had politics abuzz. What is Vanity Fair thinking? You had Wall Street abuzz. Okay, again, the Allen and Company conference would be an example of that, but also other articles that you wrote about Wall Street titans and the hedge fund industry and other things that were going on. And it felt like if you got the check mark from Graydon Carter and his team, it helped your business, it helped your career in those different genres. And by the way, Jeff Berg is a friend of mine. I think you remember Jeff Berg. I was at the Allen conference when he told me that I guess he had gotten, I don't know, a fairly big position in your Hollywood new establishment category. And he thought it was, he's a grown man, worth, lots of money, Graydon. But he was just thrilled that he was on your radar and on your list. So, and again, I'm not trying to flatter you, sir. That's the facts. So I want you to react to that. How did you manage that? How did you become the guy that the guys and the girls wanted to be in your field of vision?
Not through intent, in a funny way, because we weren't part of any of those worlds. We weren't part of Wall Street or Washington or Hollywood. Sometimes having a second party validation is often worth more than somebody within the inner circle. So one of the things we did in Hollywood is we told, the story of glamour back to Hollywood. When we did the first Oscar party, it was in the early 90s. It had really turned its back on Hollywood. The big style of the day was grunge. Young people avoided the Oscar party in droves, and it took an outside group from New York to tell Hollywood, remind them of one of their trading assets, which is glamour, or in many cases, ersatz glamour. With Wall Street, a lot of it came from the stable of writers I had. So after the financial crash in 2008, I had Michael Lewis, I had William D. Cohen, I had Bethany McLean, I had Marie Brenner, I had Brian Burrow. I mean, you can't top that. So we had such an extraordinary collection of journalists who could specialize in Wall Street. And then in Washington, a large part was that we played a big part in the White House Correspondents' Dinner, and I did a number of parties during that. We did the big after party, and I did that with Mike Bloomberg for many years, and we'd often do one on a Friday night with Christopher Hitchens. So it was, again, we were sort of interlopers, but we brought a sort of whiff of big city glamour to Washington.
Well, I met Elon Musk at one of your parties. It was, I guess, I don't know, could have been 2016 maybe. Mike invited me actually, so I was on Mike's New York City Financial Services Advisory committee. My old boss, Bob Steele, who you may remember, who was
Yeah.
deputy mayor.
Yes.
Bob told Mike, "Hey, you got to get somebody that's an entrepreneur. You can't just have the Jamie Dimons and the the Lloyd Blankfeins." And so Bob got me on there, and so Mike invited me to that party
At the French
at the
ambassadors.
French ambassador. I think it was 2016. I'm going to really test your. I took Georgette Mossbacher with me.
I love Georgette.
No, she's well. If you ever run into her, you ask Georgette how she became the ambassador to Poland. You want to hear that story?
Yeah.
Okay, so I got my ass fired on Monday, but there was an interregnum period between Friday afternoon when Reince Priebus was blown out and Monday morning, where people were scared shit of me because I had gotten Priebus removed from the White House. And so the personnel director, I called him on that Saturday. Georgette was a really good friend of mine. Priebus was stalling her ambassadorship. And I said to him, what's left in Europe? And he gave me the list. I said, okay, hold on a second. I called her on my cell phone. I said, which one of these countries would you like to go to? She said, Poland. I hung up. I said to Johnny, I want her to be made ambassador to Poland. And I brought it over to the White House to get it signed. And so she's a very dear friend of mine. And a
very good ambassador.
And she did a great job, by the way. And she did a great job for Poland, particularly with what's going on in the Ukraine. Mm-hmm. And so I'm sure you've been to her salon dinners at that circular table that she had in her apartment. But so you and I have surfaced near each other, but you did do something.
Well, we did meet at Rayo's about 20 years ago.
We did. We met at Rayo's. We were at the same table together. We were with Bo Dietl.
Bo Dietl. A lot of people who look like, surrounded by a lot of people who look like mobsters.
Yeah. So Bo tried to talk me into Wolf of Wall Street. I said, Bo, I can't do that. I said, that's like a real guy. I mean, Oliver Stone got me into Wall Street too.
I was in Wall Street too.
Of course you were. I was at the after party with you, and so was Buffett. Buffett was with us, but
Jimmy, not Warren. Yes.
Yeah. Exactly. But I just say to you that we did meet with Bo that night, and I obviously got a big kick out of you, and I'm a huge fan. But you didn't tap it yet, Graydon. And I want to get this out of you for this interview.
Okay.
Okay. And I don't want Canadian modesty, and I don't want any of that. I really want you to tell me, because I can tell you what I do well. I can tell you what I absolutely suck at.
Okay.
But you do this better than anybody that I've ever seen. People want to buy goods from Airmail because they're curated by an organization that's run by Graydon Carter. People want to go to your after parties. They wanted to go. If they didn't get into the Oscar party and they thought they were somebody, they were crushed by that. Okay, so what is it? What is the sauce that you are serving?
I think it's I think any outshoot of your life should be organic to you and your worldview and your sense of design and your taste. And I think that we built up a reputation for doing things in a first-rate manner and of treating people really well. In the olden days, before we did the Oscar party, any big event like that always had a roped-off VIP area where with like a petting zoo for famous people, off in the corner somewhere. And I said, no, if we do this, we'll make it difficult to get in, but once you're in, everybody will be treated the same. And that went with everything we did in the south of France, in New York parties, and in Washington, D.C. And I think that, there's no trickery. And so I think that if we say this is worthwhile to read or to say if there's an Airmail store to buy, we back up we back it up with a history and with our guarantee that we approve of this and we're not doing there's zero trickery. So, and I think that makes
there's one other thing. If I can be brutally honest with you, there's one other thing. It's a little bit like Franny Leibovitz this way. Your aperture focuses in, and it's one of veracity. It's one of truth. There's no mendacity in it. So if you think somebody screwed up, you write about it. I can't remember exactly what you wrote about Trump, but it was like some short-fingered, I don't know what the hell it was.
Short-fingered Bulgarian.
Bulgarian. It's fucking perfect. I mean, you can't come up with. I mean, it's like it's almost like Sudoku. You like invented Sudoku before there was Sudoku. I mean, it's like perfect, right? But my point is, you see it for what it is, and this is why people have anxiety around you, because they want you to see them as good versus
we all do.
evil.
I think it actually helps, Anthony, and I think maybe you found this too. It helps to not have been born in Manhattan and
No question.
growing up with that, because if you come from outside, you're a sponge, because this is all a wonder to you. The book critic of the New Washington Post, when she reviewed my book, she said, I was less like one of the disaffected New York writers, and much more like Buddy, the Will Ferrell character in Elf. And so I couldn't disagree with her. I can't. I just every day I just think
I see it that way for you, sir. If your book title was, I believe that there are comfortable outsiders and there are uncomfortable outsiders. Okay, and so this is crazy today because he's no longer an outsider, but Mike Bloomberg, Medford, Massachusetts, awkward start, fired from Salomon Brothers, comfortable outsider. He's now the pillar of the inside, but he was a comfortable outsider. Okay, if the title of your book was "Comfortable Outsider Becomes Curator for the Insiders," I mean that. But
I'm not going to say something like that.
What's that?
I'm not going to say something like that.
No, you're not. But you see, I'm making you blush because I can say something like that because that's what you are. This is a gift that you have. And by the way, I'm an outsider, Graydon. I've always been an outsider, but I see myself as a comfortable outsider. And let's go to Trump for a second, because he is
an
uncomfortable outsider. Okay, Giuliani is an uncomfortable outsider, and I like the mayor. The mayor helped me early on in my career, and I never say anything bad about the mayor because I see he's very troubled. But Trump is not only an uncomfortable outsider, but he's got a chip on his shoulder. He's mean at it. He didn't get into Deepdale. He's got to have 18 golf courses. Didn't it?
Is that the reason?
Oh, 100%. And you don't, and by the way, Deepdale, they would want me to landscape the fucking place. Great. Okay. I just want to make sure you know that. Okay. I have a lot of self-awareness, so I'm not delusional. Okay. But my point is, he can't get over certain things. Hollywood didn't treat him right. Let's put tariffs on.
Yes.
Harvard didn't treat him right. Let's reduce their tax exemption status.
NPR and PBS didn't treat him.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, so
I know.
So address that for me, because I see you. Let's face it, you're an insider now in many ways. I'm an insider now in many ways, but we still identify, I think, as comfortable outsiders. Am I wrong in saying that?
No, I think you're completely right. I mean, I think that maybe people born in the city, whether it's Los Angeles or Paris or London or any major city, the ones who were born there and stayed there, they may not have been the sponges, but they never will experience the outsider thing. And I actually think outsiders see so much more,
no question,
than people who live in. In New York, certainly, editors who have made their mark in New York, like Harold Ross or Harold Hayes, Henry Grunwald, Henry Luce, they came from places far away, whether it's Denver or Aspen or China or
Luce came out of China, right? He was born in China. Yeah.
Right. So they see America in a way that Americans don't, and they see New Yorkers in a way that New Yorkers don't.
Well, unfortunately I have a 40-minute window here for my podcast. I have to take you to dinner. I really want to finish this more philosophical.
We'll flip for which restaurant?
I'm sorry?
We'll flip for which restaurant?
Okay, that's a deal. I would rather go to yours, by the way, just because it's so avant-garde. But I want to get to the 5 words. So my podcast, we sell some books. I thought this book was awesome. It was a perfect book for me and my demography because of my love affair with magazines and Publishers Clearinghouse origin story. But I ask each of my writers 5 words. You're going to react to the word. You can give me a sentence or 2 sentences or just a word.
I'll do my best.
Okay, so if I say the word journalism, you say the word what?
I say the word calling, like calling and service.
See, it's interesting. So when I hear that word, I hear freedom. And this is what got me in trouble with Trump. In April of 2019, I wrote an op-ed saying, it was an open letter. I said, "Dear Mr. President, the press is not the enemy of the people." Because not only is it checking power, but when we teach our children to speak and think freely, they go on and create Facebook. They become the editor-in-chief of Vanity Fair. They create SkyBridge. They create an iPhone. When you teach the kids that they can't say anything about dear leader, now you got them in a box. They got to steal our intellectual property, or they go to an internment camp for re-education. When I hear the words journalism, or I see a journalist, I think freedom. That's why when I was getting lit up coming out of the White House, never bothered. My attitude was, that is the job of the journalist. That is the job.
First of all, your answer is much better than mine. That's number one, which is a shame.
No. You said it. It's like a calling. It's a service.
Your time at the White House, actually, you sort of, that kind of made you. I mean, it made you not just another, Wall Street success story. Yeah. It made you a cultural figure.
And it gave me a platform. It definitely gave me a platform to at least provide my analysis. And then if people thought the analysis was worth listening to,
it definitely is.
They gave me a little bit broader of an audience.
Yes, I look forward to every Friday morning because of
Well, you're very sweet. As I tell people, 𝗕cie is not my better half on that podcast. She's my better 9/10. Okay, trust me, she does a lot of work behind the scenes.
It's like Fred and Ginger, and you need both of them.
Right, exactly. Amen. Okay, so I'm going to now say the word culture, sir.
Culture. I think the culture is the texture of the life around you, that it is, whether it's pop culture or high culture or middlebrow culture, it's what separates one country from another.
Yeah. So
I'm sure you have a better answer to that.
No, not that I have a better answer, but I just want to test my answer on you.
To think of all these things.
I did, but I want to test my answer on you, because I think the culture is actually tied to the journalism. It's actually tied to the freedom, because if you have the freedom, you have unbelievable latitude in the culture. There's a reason why the Chinese don't produce international iconic pop stars. They hem these people in, but you can put a nose ring in your nose somewhere in Toronto or New York, or a tattoo weirdly on your face somewhere in London, and sing an outrageous song, and you become an international star. It has to do with the freedom. Am I wrong in saying that?
Yes, I mean, that would be an element. At the same time, a lot of great culture is created during periods of oppression.
Oppression.
But
good point.
You look, the greatest in America, I think the greatest cultural period was between the two wars. The end of World War I and the beginning of World War II. And the greatest period for movies, for mysteries, for literature,
the Great Gatsby,
clothes, for cars, for architecture, for Broadway, everything. I mean, it was just, that was the greatest, one of the great times.
Really well said. Really well said. All right, so third word. Okay, you ready?
You're going to do this better than me again.
No, I'm not even going to answer this one. Okay, just the third word. I'm just asking. I'm testing my theories on you. Power.
What?
Power.
Power. Something that should be used carefully. If the more carefully you use it, the longer you'll have it.
So well said, and it has to be used judiciously. I always, when I hear,
said judiciously rather than carefully. See, you're better than I am.
No, I didn't mean. Well, I just decentralize. When I hear the word tower, I think of decentralized. You can't have too much power, Graydon, because if you do, your brain gets skunked.
Absolutely.
Right? It gets corrupted by the power. So you have to. The founders had it right. You gotta flatten the system.
Well, we're not there right now, but anyway.
Yeah. Well, we're not. No, we're out of control. All right. Okay. 2 words for word number 4. Vanity Fair. I say Vanity Fair. You say what?
Well, I mean, my employer of 25 years, but also, it came from Pilgrim's Progress, and it was about the parade of the, each era produces a parade of figures. The 80s was very different from the 90s.
No question.
And Vanity Fair was, I think, the vessel to report on and all of that and the characters in those parades.
Yeah, I mean, beautifully said. Okay, last word. I'm going to give you the last word. I'm not going to say any word after this. Okay,
Yeah.
Graydon Carter. I say the words Graydon Carter.
Very fortunate, blessed by the people in his life, and losing his hair as we speak.
Listen, I can help you with that. I'm an expert on this shit.
Are you really?
Yeah. Oh no, 100%. I mean, offline, I'll tell you exactly what you need to do.
You've got the most beautiful head of hair. I just want to run my fingers.
This is 61 years of like hard work in health and beauty.
I just want to run my fingers through your hair.
Well, I am so delighted to have you on, and I really appreciate it. The amazing Graydon Carter. The title of the book is "When the Going Was Good: An Editor's Adventures During the Last Golden Age of Magazines." And hopefully you and I will enjoy many golden years ahead, you and me, Graydon. But
very
really appreciate you joining us today on Open Book.
Anthony, thank you so much.